Today I'm going to show you some gardening techniques for removing your lawn, and then go through a number of gardens, which most of them just happen to be front yards, where we did indeed remove the lawn. And what I'd like to do to start off with is get a sense of how many of you have a lawn that you want to remove. And is it a front yard? How many is a front yard? Okay, backyard. And all right. And how many of you have actually removed your lawn already?
Remove it from neglect or physically remove it?
Actually, a neglect is a good method. I mean physically remove it. Okay. Well, this, I don't think I need to belabor this point too much, because everyone knows that you can save money, reduce water. What I'm finding is a lot of condominiums are looking to remove their lawns right now because they're facing huge increases in their water bills. And you can, no chemicals. And if you plant it properly, which planting is very important, you can greatly reduce your maintenance. And of course, it provides habitat for wildlife, and it can be, with good planting again, visually pleasing with year-round interest. And these are some statistics from a garden survey that was done in Southern California, and they compared a native garden with a traditional lawn, and they found that it uses 1/5 of the water, 1/4 of the maintenance, and 3/5 of the green waste. And actually, I think 3/5 of the green waste is a pretty big number, because I like to keep most of that on site. There are two basic methods for lawn removal, and there's a big movement now to do sheet mulching. And that basically means that you can leave your lawn in place. You don't have to dig it out. You can just lay overlapping layers of newspapers, cardboard, or something that's called builder's paper, which I'll show you in a second. The only place where you need to remove your sod or weeds is about 1 foot from the edge of any walkways or any areas, because the main goal of this method is to deprive the lawn or the weeds of light, of sunlight. And of course, if you leave them along the edge, then sunlight will encourage them to continue to grow. It used to be the recommendation was 6 to 8 inches, but I think 12 inches is better. And then, of course, on top of that, you can add 3 or 4 inches of mulch. Now, one thing to do, if you haven't worked out your irrigation system, is to get some flags and mark where your sprinkler heads are. Because you don't want to sheet mulch over everything and then have to wonder where your sprinkler heads are, where you're going to need to either cap them off or convert them to drip irrigation. This is a device that's being used a lot now. It's called builder's paper, and it's made from recycled paper, and it comes in rolls. So if you've got, it's great to use if you have a lawn, because you just roll it out. It's about 160 feet long and about 3 feet wide. And from experience, you usually need a double layer of it, and it works really well. And then all this stuff breaks down and it basically reduces the amount of soil amendments to very little, if any, from all this material breaking down. I have seen that this material, or a similar material, is available online, but the important thing is to look for biodegradable materials. No plastic allowed. And this builder's paper happens to be available at Linkso's in Redwood City. This is a lawn removal method number 2. And this is where you remove the lawn with a sod cutter and then turn it over and use it as the base for mounds, because mounds are one of the bones of a garden that can add a lot of interest. And it's a good way to keep the sod on site. You can get a sod cutter, it's very easy to do. And I'm actually on a condominium project. We're doing kind of a modified version between 1 and 2. And where we're building the mounds, we're leaving the grass that's already there, rather than we're not even going to bother with the sod cutter in that area. So these are some really good techniques to use in removing your lawn. And I'm going to show you some gardens where that technique has been used. The thing about this is that you may need to add some soil after you have built your mound with the sod. You may need to add some additional soil to kind of smooth the edges and make it look aesthetic. This is a garden that was on the garden tour last week in San Jose. And this is where the client, I designed the garden and the client installed it themselves. And I think they did a great job. And in this area right here, this whole area was sod. This pathway was not there. And that's what they did. They just turned it over and built these mounds here. There's some mounds here. And so it worked out beautifully for them. And this is another view of that same garden. I like to talk about the bones of the garden because one thing I hear a lot from people when they're thinking about using California natives is they say, I don't like that desert look. I like things looking interesting year-round. I've seen a lot of native gardens and they just look terrible at certain times of the year. Well, that is all a method of planting because those of you who are familiar with native plants know that there are certain plants that hold their appearance year-round, and there are lovely plants that bloom at different times of the year, so you can get seasonal interest. And what I consider good bones for a garden are paths, and you'd be surprised even in a very small space, you can effectively use paths. Rocks. And Sonoma fieldstone is a very popular rock to use around here because it is indigenous to California at least, and it fits in with the character of the area. Mounds we've already talked about. Dry creek beds are also a good way of organizing the garden, and they can be multifunctional. They can, if you have a drainage problem, they can be a good way to divert the water. If they're done properly, they can be used as pathways as well as a dry creek bed. And I have some pictures of that. And then the other bones of the garden is I like to use clusters of shrubs surrounded by low ground covers, because in that way I get interesting heights and shapes throughout the garden. This garden was also on the Native Garden Tour this year. It was in Mountain View. And once again, this demonstrates the use of rocks. This walkway was actually set in compressed, decomposed granite as a mortar. And it's been in about 10 years, and it's held up really well. And then this other side path, which I have some other views of, is compressed, decomposed granite. The entryway, of course, is wider. And this was a flat lawn. It was, if you wanted to get to the house, you walked up the driveway. And so we added a front entryway to give more of a sense of entry to the house. And this is a good way of this little side path. This yard is only about maybe 400 or 500 square feet. So we used the decomposed granite path and created a mound in the center, and then had a lower border, flowering border here, and some taller plants in the back. And this is another view with a little sitting rock. And this is the front entryway. So you can see with the use of the paths, you can bring some very simple organization into a garden, and then you can sort of say, okay, this area is going to be my accent focal point, where I'm really going to have some accent shrubs or some accent perennials, and then around the edges I might have some shrubs or just some low, wide-spreading ground covers. that stay evergreen so that my accent points really pop out when they're in bloom. And this is the front entry view. This is a garden in Palo Alto, and this was a large front yard, and the client wanted a sitting area in the front yard because they felt like it was just kind of wasted space with the lawn. And so once again, we used paths and mounds. Now the idea here, and this garden is only about a year old, so it's hard to see it, but the intention was, and you'll see there's a rock wall here, which you'll see in some other shots. But the screening, this is a Ceanothus blue jeans, which gets up to about 6 feet tall. There's a holly leaf cherry, and then there's some other shrubs here that are placed in a triangle pattern so that over time it will give more privacy from the street. And this is the compressed decomposed granite. I'm kind of beeping here. Come back a little bit. This is a compressed decomposed granite patio surface, which worked really well. And of course, these are decomposed granite paths.
What's the size of the pebbles in the compressed decomposed?
It's very small, and it's probably less than 1/4 of an inch. And the idea is that when you install it, it's a wonderful path surface, but it really has to be installed properly because it has to be compressed with a roller. And you do several layers and you let it dry. And if you don't compress it properly, then it's mushy in the wintertime. But it's a great semi-impervious path surface, and they hold up really well if they're properly installed.
And that's available at building supply stores?
Places you can get the materials from places like Lingso's and building supply stores. Yes, I tend it comes in gray, but I like the gold vines myself, or kind of more of the earth colored granite. Although gray is an earth tone as well. And my next slides are going to be several views of this same garden, so you can get more of a sense of what I did here.
Question. Were you going to talk or mention the names of some of the plants you're looking at in the pictures?
Yes, I can. I think I did earlier in the previous slide. Let me go back here. This is the Bluebedder pestamon. This is the California fuchsia, which tends to be the star in the garden later in the season. This is the holly leaf cherry that I mentioned. And this was, I think this was blue jeans Ceanothus. And then as a kind of a secondary layer, I use the Cleveland sage because they can get 4 to 5 feet tall in themselves. So I'm trying to create privacy without a real dense, hedgy look. And I think this is coffeeberry right here, but you can't really see this picture. And